Hi, loves. How are you? I'm so excited to be back with you for another episode of Thriving Together. I'm your host, Nitika, and we are going to have such a great episode today. I feel like my guest I feel like she interviewed me for half the episode. It was so fun. And she is just such a bright light, such a ball of energy. And she's just such a beautiful person and doing really interesting, exciting, fun, important work in this world. So I'm going to get into a little bit more about her in just a moment, but there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening for Chronicon right now. We still have our amazing app. We have so many new features in the app that I'm super excited about. So if you've been wondering about joining Chronicon, you can join now and get group coaching from me, which is something I've sort of informally done in the community for a long time, but I'm making it more of a formalized aspect of what we do every single month. So once a month, you get a group coaching call with me, which is awesome. And it's on Zoom. So we'll see each other face to face. Of course, you can have your camera off if you want to, but we'll be there. And I'm bringing in my personal nervous system coach who has totally transformed and changed my life over the last 2 years of working with her. I have I can't even begin to describe how much Amy has helped me. She's also been on the podcast. If you haven't listened to her episode yet, you should definitely take a listen. But I work with Amy personally every single week, and I know that the work that we're doing is so incredibly life changing and so important. And it really needs to be the foundation of whatever changes I think we want to make in this world, and with ourselves, starting with ourselves always. So I'm bringing Amy in to actually work with our members. Every single month, you get a session with her. You can ask her your questions. You can also access past recordings that we have with Amy, which is great. So you can work with her. You can see like all the ways she's worked with us in the past as well, and catch up on that. As soon as you join the community, you'll be able to see that. And it's just been an incredible process, an incredible journey having her work with our members. So those are some of the new offerings that we have. We, of course, always still have our content every single day that's exclusive to the app. I know we have content on our Instagram, but it is nothing like the content that we have in our actual community. And yeah, it's just a monthly membership. It's super easy. And if you do the annual membership, which I actually really recommend, so you can just like set it and forget it and be a part of the community and not have to think about those monthly payments, you actually get, I think, a month or 2 months discounted off of doing the yearly membership. So go check that out. I hope you join us. Definitely slide into my DMs at Nitika Chopra if you decide that you want to join. I love meeting and connecting with our members, and I'm in there every single day. That's the other thing. I know a lot of communities have founders that, are kind of half in there, not really focused on the actual membership that much. That's not me. I am in there all the time. I'm answering questions. I'm spending time with each member every single week, whoever shows up to the events. And it is just the light of my life. And I'd love to have you be a part of it. So that's a little bit about the community. And then we also, I think by the time this episode comes out, we would have also announced some really big, exciting things that are happening this fall with Chronicon. And we actually get into them a little bit in this episode. So I'll let you listen to the episode to hear that unfolding. But I hope you'll be joining us. I cannot wait to meet a lot of you in person around the country. And yeah, you'll be able to hear a little bit more about that in just a little bit in this episode. So let's get into the episode. So today I am talking to Emily Tisch Sussman, who has been a dear friend of mine for years. And she is the creator and host of the award-winning iHeart podcast, She Pivots. She's also a Tony nominated producer, a Marie Claire contributor, a Democratic political strategist, and a mother of three. I don't know how she does it all. With a passion for amplifying women's voices, she shares the stories of those who have successfully pivoted in their personal and professional lives, sharing how they turn challenges into formative opportunities. Emily created She Pivots after leaving her fast-paced job as the VP of campaigns at the largest Democratic think tank in Washington, D.C. Her pivot pushed her to confront her own idea of success without the career she thought she'd have forever. Emily is a seasoned host, having interviewed leaders and influential women, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Secretary Hillary Clinton, Priyanka Chopra, Sophia Bush, and many others. So I am really excited that Emily is here with us on the show. I mean, the first 10 minutes of the conversation are us just like, adoring each other and sharing a little bit about our love for each other. And I just think it's a fun conversation. And then we really get into what happens when we need to pivot. What does that look like? And hopefully it'll be a supportive episode for you as you navigate whatever's going on in your life. Thank you so much for being here, y'all, and enjoy this week's episode of Thriving Together. All right, y'all. I am so excited to be here with the amazing Emily Tisch Sussman. I have just loved this woman for so long. I mean, at least over a decade now, if not like a decade and a half. And I just could not be more thrilled to be on like having this conversation with you and for you to be on my podcast because I was on your amazing podcast not that long ago. So thanks for being here.
I love Nitika so much, and I'm so honored to be here. That the last 60 seconds were the hardest of my life because she emailed me before this and she said, the whole podcast is very conversational, so don't talk until we're recording. And so I have been using all of my energy to not speak for the last 60 seconds while we got this on. And that was the hardest thing I've ever, like I tried to not even say little words to like affirm what you were saying, to like I could acknowledge like, yes, I hear what you're saying, because I knew once I started talking to you, we would never start recording.
Emily, that is so dramatic and I love it so much.
I feel like that intensely. It was really hard for me to not talk to you.
I love it. I love it. This is why I love Emily, because like there's no question about how you're feeling, what you're thinking. I love people like that. Like there's enough mystery in the world when it comes to other things. Like let's just be real. First of all, I totally forgot that I wrote that in the email, and now I'm like, do I need to rewrite my prep email? But I'm so glad.
It was excellent prep. It was very good prep, because sometimes I don't know, like, did I enter when we're starting? Am I waiting for a question? And they're like, oh, we still haven't started recording yet. And I'm like, well, I gave you all my best material already, So I really appreciated that upfrontness.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And by the way, do you want to know how I really am feeling? I'm really feeling very tired because my 4-year-old now sleeps with me.
Why are you
and from
feeling
3
tired?
to 4 a.m.
I mean, you're taking over the world like literally one podcast at a time. So what's happening?
Oh, well, my 4-year-old every night from 3 to 4 a.m. she goes, Mommy, is it okay if I peed in your bed? And I'm like, no, it absolutely is not. And she goes, and so I'm like, did you? I said, yeah, I did. So now she's proficient in like changing the sheets and like putting a towel down. Let's be honest, we're not always changing the sheets. Like she's gotten better at that, but like it's happened every night for the last many, many nights. So I'm a little fried.
A little fried. Wow, Emily, I really appreciate the realness. I mean, you're always so real, but I appreciate it because, sitting from my apartment in Brooklyn, I just like look at all the amazing people like Misty Point and Fran Drescher, just to name two that you've gotten to talk to recently. And I'm just like, you are living your best life. And I guess both things can be true, right? We can have like our 4-year-old pee in our bed, and then we can also go hang out with Misty Point and Fran Drescher, which is just, I think, the epitome of what life is. But yeah, I look at so much of what you're doing and I'm so proud of how much you've grown at the show. I feel like this was just, a tiny idea when we first started talking about it. And now to see that it's like been picked up and you have a team around it and like you're just doing it, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful thing. So I want to talk to you about all of it today. I want to chat about pivoting. Her podcast is She Pivots. So, that's why we're talking about pivoting today. And I want you all to check it out. But I want to talk to you about like what even had you get inspired to start talking about pivoting? Like what was that first moment like where you're like, oh, I think this is the thing that I need to be focusing on? Why would you have that realization?
Well, I wouldn't have had the realization had I not had to go through it. Like had I not been forced through it, I wouldn't have been like, I didn't really understand how people talked about things like related to themselves. Like I never really understood that. I think a little helpful background here is that I'm a lawyer by training, and I spent a decade working in Washington in federal policy, a decade and a half working on campaigns. And I was in media, like I went on cable news as a political commentator for about a decade, sometimes every day. Like I was on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. So I was used to talking. I've always been
Mm-hmm.
used to. I think we can all acknowledge I've always been used to talking, but it wasn't about myself. Um, and I felt like I actually couldn't bring myself into it. I mean, and some of it wasn't appropriate. Like, right, like I was talking about like my analysis of campaigns or how federal legislation was moving. My actual job was to design the structure of an issue campaign. Like if we want to get from here to there, like if we want an issue to pass Congress, how does it get there? Like that was my actual job. So in this case, it wasn't really appropriate to talk about myself. But
Mm-hmm.
how I felt was decidedly not a part of my job. Like it was, I couldn't bring it in. Like the way that I was successful was that I outworked people around me. I didn't have boundaries. I did it often as a detriment to my mental health, my physical health. I did it for years and I was successful. Like I actually don't want to downgrade that part, is that it actually was a key to me being very successful in my career, that I did work really hard. And the question of like, how did I balance? I didn't balance. I worked. That's what I prioritized. That changed when I got pregnant for the first time. I was pretty sick in my pregnancies and I just couldn't keep up. Like it wasn't even like, oh, I wanted to step away and like have this balance. And it was like so beautiful. No, it absolutely sucked. I was totally sick. I couldn't keep up. And couldn't even talk about this part, but like I would look to you for inspiration, and honestly got a lot of inspiration from people that had chronic illness, which I understand that I had a temporary situation. And so I felt even guiltier that like I couldn't talk about it. Like I was having many of the same symptoms, but it was temporary for me. And so I really couldn't talk about that. There was just no place for me to be talking about how I was impacted. And I really didn't want people that I worked with around me to know that I wasn't keeping up,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody knew me as, before I had a kid and like knew how I worked. And so I had two kids very quickly back to back. And it was at the end of the second maternity leave. I didn't go back to my big high powered job because I literally couldn't. Like I physically could not keep up the pace. It was not that I was stepping away to spend more time with my kids, like not at all. I found my kids extremely annoying as babies. Like I never connected to babies, and only now they are not babies, I can say that out loud, that I still didn't really connect with them at babies. And I'm a good mom, like, right? Like both things can be true. I probably wasn't a good mom when they were babies, but I am now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but so it was after that, and then I had a third baby pretty quickly after that, and I'm like clinging, trying to keep my political job alive, like some semblance of it. And then 3 weeks after the baby was born, we went into the lockdown, the global pandemic. So I had a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and 3-week-old, and it was impossible. Like I literally could not keep any foot in either politics or media, like the two spaces that I straddled, because both careers are kind of about like having like the latest information, like being up on things, like
Mm-hmm.
being able to like keep up, and like I couldn't. It was insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it was impossible. So I started feeling like my identity was tied to being good at my job. That didn't exist for me. The only thing I had left was taking care of 3 children I really felt no connection to. And so I was gone. Like my whole identity was gone.
I will.
And I thought, I've got to get some advice. Like there has to be somebody who has gone through this or something, probably something worse. Like I actually need to know that it's something worse. This can't be the worst thing that can happen to a person. I need to know that somebody else went through something and came out of it not actually the same. Like I don't love the phrase resilience, because that implies you're going back to the same, and like I'll never be the same. But I need to know that I'm going to come out of it to find some level of satisfaction and like some identity, and be able to make something that feels right to me. And maybe it'll be just as good as it was before. Like not the same kind of thing, but like in a different field. Like, can I be equally as successful? Maybe. Like maybe can I be so ambitious to think I'll be more successful? Probably not. Let's not get greedy. Let's just think like, can I be okay? And so I started this idea of interviewing women, because honestly, we've heard enough from men. But, like interviewing women who have gone through something personal that changed them so to their core, like that it changed their whole perspective, and they came out with something different on the other side. And they couldn't have had this success on the other side had it not been for that very personal thing that they went through. So that was how I came up with the idea of She Pivots. And that is the core of what we continue to do today, is trying to get to this cultural piece of like, how do we bring the personal into our professional narratives? And how do we show that we are a success because of the personal thing that we went through? And honestly, you were one of the first people that I thought of when I was thinking of this show, because you have been such a champion for a long time, long before it was in vogue. But if talking about how your success is a product of everything you have gone through, and you could not have found these versions had you not been through it. So thank you for coming on She Pivots.
Mhm. Thank you for having me. And wow, I'm just taking in all of that. I knew that because we're friends, but it's something different to hear, it sort of laid out that way, which is a bit different when you're friends with someone and you're just sort of in it with them or seeing it, moment by moment. And it's different to hear it sort of laid out. And I'm just really inspired by the fact that you took that moment and you made that pivot. I think why the show is so successful is so many people resonate with that. So many people have to pivot. And I know folks who are listening, who have chronic illnesses or disabilities, or, maybe came to that later in life even, and it's sort of upended their lives. And they're like, okay, now what do I do? It's such a, it's such a like easy thing to say, like, or not, I don't know. It's what we're told, I think, in a lot of ways, where if something like that happens, like you were saying, you're like, oh, it's over now. Like, this is it. Like, I'm just like done. Like, this is the end. And it's really helpful to hear all of these different ways where that could not be further from the truth. But being able to see things from a different lens, being able to reinvent yourself, and just being open to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think I'm learning now, even in the stage for my career, I'm learning just being open to the fact that like things could be different than I thought they were going to be. I think that actually is like the most courageous first step. Like, did you ever sort of rub up against that part where you were like maybe resisting things being different, or were you just so done that it was like, oh no, it has to be different? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, also just want to say that not only
Yeah.
to accept that things can be different, but they will be.
Yeah.
Like things are constantly going to change. Like
Uh-huh.
sometimes for the worse, that the thing you thought you were working towards is maybe no longer accessible, but also sometimes for the better. That like
Yeah.
once you're open to a different version of success and reframing what tools you have in front of you, you can actually find a different kind of satisfaction. So,
Hmm.
like before, I would say that my version of success was very by the book. It was like title, corner office, compensation, access to power. And like none of those things are accessible to me right now, right? Like I don't have a title, like there's no office. I work out of my bedroom. Like none of those things are possible. So like, did I come up against that moment when I was forced? Yeah, for sure. I was so frustrated that I had done everything right in my political career. Like I did the jobs, I took the notes, I worked like I did
Yeah.
everything right. And it was still inaccessible to me. That was unbelievably frustrating.
I was
So
just gonna
the
say, I'm like, it's unbelievably frustrating for me to hear that and just be like, well, it's also kind of like comforting too on the other side, because I feel like, for someone like me, I've never had the fancy job. I've always kind of done beaten, to my own drum or whatever it's called. And I've always felt like, oh, I should have done it this way, or like, look at all these people who are doing it this other way. Like, I should, I'm Indian, for God's sakes. I mean, it's ingrained in us. Like, I should have become a doctor. I should have become a lawyer. I should have done something, but that's something I've been telling my mom a lot. Like, as I follow my dreams and I do my own thing, like, she's always worried about me. And I'm constantly being like, do you know how many people I know like did the exact right thing? And then like there were layoffs, or like there were so many things that are happening that are out of their control. So I'm just like taking that in, because that is kind of mind blowing.
I mean, that's a big part of the journey is saying that like, yes, everything builds upon itself. And even if someone does it the exact right way, it still might not work out the way they think it will. And I also think a really big piece of this is just being super realistic. like realistic about your bandwidth, realistic about your finances, realistic about your ability to need to stay on insurance. Like those things are very real. And if we tell people to go chase their dreams all the time, it puts them in an impossible situation because then
Mhm.
they feel like they're failing on both fronts. Like it's a no-win situation. Like you can't chase the dream because you're tied to a job because you need the health insurance. You feel like everything you're doing all day long is supposed to be your ultimate dream. That's not realistic either. Nobody is living their ultimate dream every day, every minute of every day, right? Like it's just not realistic. So like a lot of the conversations that I have with particularly women who are thinking about pivoting, and maybe we can have this conversation right now if you're ready.
Yeah.
um, but being realistic in this moment, like I think that part of the mass exodus of moms from the workforce during COVID and like the pop up of like the Etsy shop version of employment, like I think part of that made us think that everyone is supposed to have this really hard pivot where they suddenly find their dreams and chase it, and it's successful as if you have like no other obligations going on. Like that's also just not realistic. So like being super real about what is your bandwidth right now? Like maybe you take care of an elderly parent. Maybe because of your chronic illness, your energy is really low. Maybe you can only work at certain times of the day.
Mhm.
Maybe like for me right now, I basically only work the hours my kids are in school. And like if a meeting is running into 4 p.m., it's just not going to happen. Like,
Mhm.
sorry, you can't reach me then because my kids are with me and they do not like my divided attention. Quite frankly, I'm not my best self for either the people I'm meeting with or my kids. So let's just not even try it.
Yeah.
But like being really realistic about that, I think will actually help a lot of people. And with the financial piece of it too. Like
Mhm.
maybe, I was forced out of my career, so I had to make kind of a hard turn. But if that is the thing that is sustaining you or your family, you're not just going to quit your job because somebody told you you'd make a great Etsy shop. Like that's not real. Like maybe you take 6 months of exploration, of doing coffee circles with your friends and saying, what am I really good at and where is the market for it? And then you take another 6 months, because this is all the time you have in a week, to look into what are the regulations around it. I mean, I talked to the high school where my kids go to school last week, and a kid came up to me afterwards and he's like, my mom's really trying to get this business off the ground, but she takes care of us. She supports my mom's landscaping business. Can you give me some advice for her? And I was like, well, what's the business? And he said, she wants to import coffee from Colombia, where we're from. And I was like, there are a lot of federal regulations around food and importing and exporting food. I would say, let's spend a little time looking into what those are. And it can take us as long as we want it to take us. But we can't really start thinking about great packaging until we've taken this time to think about that. Like it's kind of a high bar to serve. So I would just say be really realistic. And
Mhm.
at first that can seem a little depressing, but it's actually quite
Yeah.
empowering once you set
No,
like good benchmarks for yourself.
it's so important though, and I really appreciate you bringing us back down to planet Earth because I feel like the reason why I'm saying it that way is because this is like what I am, and we can talk about my pivot in a second, but this is what I am actually learning. I'm sort of learning it backwards, and I think a lot of people have. Like, I have always built everything from my heart, from my gut, from my story. It has not been because I have some business degree and I know what the hell I'm doing. It has been because I'm like, oh, I experienced this pain and I want to help somebody else who's experiencing this pain, or I have this passion, or think something like that. And then I've sort of had to come to reality on the flip side of that and say, oh, wait a second, this is going to cost this much money, or this is how much I'm bringing in. The health insurance thing is huge. Like, for so long, I've been on a medication that costs $5,000 a month. And if I don't have, for 18 years, I've been on this medication. And if I don't have health insurance, which allows me to bring it down to like $50, and then I think with like a copay assistance program, it's even like $5 now, which is amazing. I literally can't walk. I can't, like, my whole life will change if I don't have this medication. So health insurance has always been the top of my list. I'm probably one of, I think, a few of my sort of entrepreneurial friends. I have really good health insurance, not because I have a special job, because it's the one thing that I'm like, girl, even if you do not know how you're going to figure out most of the stuff for your month, you will always have the health insurance that's going to make sure that you get what you need, you know? So those are kind of the things that I know a lot of folks are thinking about, but a lot of times they catch us off guard because we're so busy thinking about the dream, and we're so busy just like fantasizing about that and not really wanting to come down to earth to see, like, okay, what is it actually going to take in real life? So yeah, I can share a little bit about this pivot that I kind of teased to you before we started. I mean, I think by the time this episode comes out, like, our Instagram and community, like, will already know about it. But I just decided this like a few days ago. So, we have our conference every year, Chronicon, and of course, we had to pause it for the pandemic, but we brought it back last year. And I decided, instead of doing a conference, I'm actually going to have us do a multiple city tour. And I'm going to sort of bring the panels to the communities and to the audiences around the country. So, this is a huge pivot because I definitely think, like, it's been ingrained in me. We're Chronicon, like, we have a conference, like, that's what we do, like, that is our, model. And at the same time, we still are a very small team. It's still pretty much me doing the nuts and bolts. Of course, I have somebody helping with marketing now. I have Katie who's helping with our social, but the actual structure of, like, the day to day of, the production and the content in our community and workshops and all of that, it's just me. And so when we talk about the bandwidth and the reality and the realistic aspect of these conversations that we're having, I had to have a really honest conversation with myself and be like, babe, you already had crazy health things happen because you took on way too much. Like, how is putting on a conference that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I don't think people always realize? I put on a very, highbrow conference. I do not skimp on things, right? Which I know you get. So it was costing me a little too much, to be totally honest, on every level. And then I also think there's this really beautiful opportunity, like you talk about, right? Like, how does the pivot actually turn something into something better than you had originally thought it would be? So that's sort of my insider information. Although I know most of you will probably have heard of this news if, by the time the episode comes out.
Well, congratulations on making the decision.
Thank you.
You touched on a little bit of part of what I would ask if someone's like embarking on a pivot,
Yeah.
which is try to hone in and be specific on what you're trying to get towards and what you're trying to get rid of. Because often we conflate the two things.
Mhm.
And I think people say, like, again, people do this like Etsy shop, I feel like came up a lot. And we're like, oh, I'm gonna leave my job and start an Etsy shop. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's separate those.
Yeah.
So what are we trying to gain and what are we trying to lose?
Mm.
So I put that on you, like, as you're making this decision, like, why is, like, don't, I guess for me, I don't want to just like jump to the right answer. I want
Yeah.
to first figure out what we're trying to gain or lose. So like, I would say that to you, like, what are you trying to change and why is this the right answer?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. I think I guess I sort of think I asked that question to myself without realizing that I was asking that question. So I love the way you framed that.
Because you're a
I
great
think,
interviewer. So you were interviewing yourself.
well, maybe you're a great interviewer. Look at you interviewed me on my own show, um, which I love. But I think what I want to gain is having more access to people in different areas. Honestly, I think that's like a huge part of it. Like, I'm so New York centric, and yet our app is global and it's around the country, and I never go anywhere else. So I felt like there was like a disconnect in that aspect. Like, we've built this huge following on Instagram. We have people, again, from all over the world, but like, I am only staying here. And so, like, that felt like a disconnect. I wanted to gain more connection to those people. And then I will say what I wanted to lose was, like, the financial burden, to be totally honest. Like I am the one taking that on. I don't have investors. I don't have, people who are swooping in to come just like write huge checks. It's really from my, work and my efforts towards this mission. And I will still continue doing all of that and still continue raising funds and all of those things. But yeah, I think I was just like, wait a second. If the impact is that I want every person who has a chronic illness to know that they are not alone, like I don't only have to do it in this one way. And I think that is kind of the combination of those things is what led me to my answer.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
worry for you, this is just me being your friend, that the logistics of putting on events in multiple cities and traveling is one, complicated to execute events in cities you don't live in. I
Mm-hmm.
once threw a rally for Lady Gaga in a state I had never been to, in 72 hours, and it turned out the state quote stadium I thought that we were putting her in was actually a community college, and it was like a field, the porta potty. So that was a challenge.
Okay.
But because I'd never been there, it's like I didn't know the contractors, I didn't know it. It's hard to
Yeah.
manage things remotely. A lot of events is hard, and also I just find travel really hard on my body, which I know is something that is a factor for you. So
Yeah.
I would just say, are you thinking about those pieces, and how are you thinking about
Yes.
scaffolding around them?
I'm totally thinking about those pieces. I love that this is like a coaching session. I'm totally thinking about those pieces. I have community members in all of the places that I am thinking of going. So we would be co-creating the events together, which I think is really important. And then also I have brand partners in different markets too. So we would be co-creating that in terms of like the space and things like that. I feel like I've been producing events for 14 years now, so I do think I know the right questions to ask. And I've also done a lot of it would be a smaller event, right? So it'd be like an evening, like a 7 to 10 or 6 to 9, not this like multiple, like 75,000 moving parts thing. And for, more intimate audiences. So for like 50 to 75 people at each location versus like 300 at one location. So I have been thinking about those things. I literally made this decision on Thursday and it is Tuesday. So I still have a lot to think about, but I have been asking myself those questions. And I think over the next couple of weeks, it will be more crystallized. Like the easier markets that I have are like San Francisco and LA. I know I have tons of people there, even Chicago. So that's probably where I'll start and see like, does that feel easy? Does that feel like it's flowing and it's happening without too much friction or too much, this feeling of things are upside down or it's not coming together? If it happens with ease in those markets, then I feel like I'll feel more confident to move forward with a couple of places where I don't know as many people. Yeah. So that's
That
kind
makes
of my
sense.
my feeling about it. But who knows, Emily? Maybe I'll call you crying in like 2 weeks and be like, "This was a terrible idea. We need to do another interview, and I'm gonna pivot again." I have no
And you
idea.
know what? You can pivot again. Like the
Yeah,
first
I
answer is
know.
not always the answer. And by the way, this
So
might be the
true.
answer, but this is
So
why I'm like a
true.
little hesitant to always jump towards fixing the question with a solution,
Yeah,
because that solution might not be the solution
totally.
and it might not fit, and that's okay. Like that's
Yeah,
part of the process. I mean, She Pivots as a podcast evolved in 100 ways before it became what it is right now. I mean, I actually started it. I thought the only way I would be able to get big guests is if I made it an in-person award ceremony and gave them an award. And then the podcast would be like a side
yeah.
thing. They would like have to commit to sitting down with me. And so when I opened the LLC, it was called Pivot Awards. And in fact, that is what the trademark was originally called. And then as soon as I launched the podcast called Pivot, I immediately got a cease and desist order from the podcast called Pivot, because I had like envisioned it in a totally different way. And oh my God, was I mad. Mostly at my IP attorneys who had done the check for me, but like also at myself,
Yeah.
that I had gone through these different iterations and phases and like not kept a really complete checklist to make sure that I was like keeping up with it. But you know what? 2 weeks later, when someone else launched something that looked exactly like mine, I sent them a cease and desist letter, and I felt totally vindicated because
I remember.
I had just gone through this massive IP switch. But like,
Yes.
it was different versions. And I think that all of those versions got me to where I am right now. And I
Yeah.
couldn't have gotten to this point had I not gone through like a solid year of like
Yeah.
business planning around it. And it took a long time because I had very low bandwidth still with 3 kids under 4. We moved 8 times in 18 months during the pandemic. My confidence was super low. Like I'm sure I had some version of postpartum. Like all of these things were
Mhm.
real. And I can acknowledge that as part of where I got to be right now. Like I really want to break open this idea that we look at people as successes and be like, oh, of course, that's a great story. Sort of like the how I built this version of like everybody's success. Like, yeah, we went through it, but like, what a great founder story. Like
Mm,
sometimes some things just take more time and you have to be able to be okay in that moment and not let you drag you down into a depression to thinking, oh my God, I was wrong. I can't do it. This isn't it. I can't get to successful right away. Like you have to just kind of believe in yourself a little bit and also accept that things will change. Like they have to evolve. And so be able to say like, this is part of my process.
mhm. Wow, Emily, I love that so much. I'm like, oh, I should have called you like 100 times. I have been like, because it's so true. As a founder, I grew up sort of like in the coaching industry, and that was like its own business and health and wellness and whatever. But then I really did pivot when I started Chronicon into being more of like a founder and wanting to be more aligned with a founder story and like, how do I build a really successful company and not be like an influencer coach person? Which is fine if that works for you. It just like wasn't my end goal. And yeah, I think that that's been a huge part of the process has been like unlearning. Oh, that one person that I know that I saw on Inc. magazine, and I'm just like, oh, I'm supposed to be there. And like somehow this person, figured it out. And like I haven't figured it out yet. And all of this doubt and all of this like insecurity that comes up as I build this. And I do continue to go back to the impact that we want to make and knowing that it's going to change and all of that. But I have a question though, and I think you've kind of answered this, but I want to dig a little deeper into it is like, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, like, especially with our community and our app, I never knew anything about online marketing. That's like not something I've ever learned. I've been more, experiential production, things like that, media. And I definitely have this thought sometimes where I'm like, oh, I wish I had known about certain things with marketing the app that I'm now implementing and learning now and, whatever, but I didn't know them sooner. So, do you ever feel like in the conversations around pivoting, like, I don't know, do you ever like regret that you didn't know things before? Or do you ever feel like, no, or do you always feel like, oh, no, it's just part of the pivot and it's totally fine? Like, what is your relationship to that?
Well, I have to continuously check myself. Like I still have feelings about not being in my former career. Like I'm
Mm,
still sad about it. Like I still mourn it. And that's okay, I guess. I don't know. Like
it
I feel
is.
like
Oh my God,
saying
it's
it's
totally
okay.
okay.
Well, I feel like saying it's okay sounds a little too like toxic positivity. Like it sucks. It sucks when I'm in the feeling. And like I've flirted with going back into it and I've thought about, do I take one political client? And I have over the years taken one for 6 months or a year. um, I had conversations last summer about potentially going back to Washington for a short-term job, and it didn't work out. And it didn't work out because they didn't want me. Like I was willing to make a lot of sacrifices, and in the end, they didn't want me. And it was partly because I couldn't make all the sacrifices. And that was really depressing and sad. And they
Mm,
really confirmed for me that that door is closed for me for the time being. Maybe it will be open again one day, but I can't bank on it. I can't be like, I'm resilient and like my career will come back. Like, I don't know that it will, but I have to then find other things to say that I'm okay about. Like, I drop my kids off at school every day that I'm home. I pick them up every day that I'm home. Right. Like, and those things do matter to me. And I know that my friends that work in the White House don't. And in fact,
mm,
that's often why they end up leaving after a year because they feel like they just missed a year of their kids' lives. So
yeah.
yeah, like it's hard. I mean, what is my relationship to
Mhm.
pivoting? That it's constantly happening. And you mentioned like the founder story, like feeling like you're supposed to be in it. And I feel like I constantly have to check myself too
Yeah.
against other women in particular who are in this kind of sort of like a similar space to be like,
Yeah.
why'd that bitch get so popular so fast? Like, why is she doing so well? Because I am genuinely happy for them. And
Yes.
many of them are my friends.
Yeah.
But like, I can hold both feelings at the same time. I can both wish that I had their success and want to emulate it, and also feel a little bit about why not me.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
can be okay with that, but I'm in a constant checking myself to remind myself that. And I also find that many women are very open if you come with that level of humility and just be like, I really want to learn from you. I am so inspired by what you did. I really want to learn from you. Like, I do think that we're in a very big rising tide moment
Yeah.
where women are not viewing one another as competition, especially when we're in these spaces where like they're actually truly not competitive. Like
Yeah.
following one influencer versus another, people don't follow one or the other. It's actually additive. Like if you like this, you'll like that. And the
Mm-hmm.
exact same thing is true with podcasts. Like no person can put out so much content that a listener won't listen to anything else. It's actually just additive. Like if someone likes this content, then they'll like your content. And so there's all the reasons for us to be helping one another. And I think that most people do get that. There's still some that get that competitive feeling and are not so into it. But I find overall much more willing to be open to helping one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm noticing that too. And I think that there is this sort of breaking down the veil, like lifting, the kind of pretenses. I think it's happening more and more. It's obviously not across the board with every single person, but I do find that these richer conversations, more meaningful connections, and all of that is happening more often than it was for a while. So, yeah, maybe our nervous system as a collective is shifting. I always bring everything back to the nervous system these days. So maybe that's it. But I'm so happy that we got a chance to chat today, Emily. And one of the questions that I always ask people is what does thriving look like for you?
Thriving for me feels like I get to control my time. That is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah.
I can't control every minute. I can't control every day. But for the most part, I can decide how and where I put the majority of my energy. And that changes constantly, by the way. And it changes where my priorities are.
Mm,
And again, it's not perfect every day. And I don't spend every minute living my best self or doing exactly what I want to be doing. But on the whole, I do get to decide how I spend the majority of my time and energy. And that is thriving for me.
I love that. Well, I'm so glad that we got to chat. Also, I just like love you and feel like my podcast is definitely like a selfish way for me to connect with all my favorite people, which I'm sure
It's
you
literally,
can.
oh,
Yeah.
it's literally how I make friends.
Yeah.
It's how
It's
I'm
just
like,
like,
she seems cool. Do you feel like we get along? And then I
yeah,
invite her on
like
the
let's have
podcast.
her on the show.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm so happy that we got to chat. I'm so happy we also got to share our friendship with my audience and that they get to learn a little bit more about you and your amazing work. So we'll have everything in the show notes so you can follow Emily and make sure to listen to her amazing show. She has some of the most incredible guests and she's a beautiful interviewer. As you saw, she interviewed me for half the episode. So, you can definitely follow along. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, Emily. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. And let's keep talking as you're evolving this and as you're pivoting. Let's keep checking in.
I'm ready. Thanks, honey.
Bye.